I mean, there's two sides to consumer acceptance. One is you bring them to the level of the product how it's normally expected, or you gradually drive them to a new experience. So those are two ways you could do it. But I think here is the role now of the innovators, so product development process, because the veggie pasta we made, I had one key role. That was the pasta has to have the same eating experience as as regular pasta. Because indeed, the barrier to entry is much less if I'm eating a beetroot pasta and it feels like pasta. Rather than if it feels like something else, then yeah, there you have an issue. And you see.
Hi, and welcome back to Poppin' Bubbles podcast. I'm your host, Lisa.
And I'm Stefan.
And today we're having an episode on sustainable food systems, and we're joined by some really cool guests today.
Yes, so we have Madhura Rao and Sean Patrick.
Welcome. Thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, that's true. So, Madhura, maybe we could start with you. Maybe you could tell a little bit about your background, what you're up to.
Yes, of course. So my name is Madhura Rao, and I am a researcher who focuses on food policy, on food regulations, and the governance of sustainable food systems. I am currently a postdoctoral researcher with the Athena Institute at the Vrije Universiteit in Amsterdam. 6 months back, I defended my PhD, which was about food waste valorization. And other than my academic job, I also freelance as a science communication practitioner and consultant. So yeah, that's it about me.
So, I had to look it up. Valorization. What is the definition of valorization?
In the simplest terms, creating value out of something.
Okay. That's really cool.
Creating value out of food. Or food
Waste.
No, it's
Food waste.
Okay, food waste. Okay, that's interesting.
And Sean, how about you?
Oh,
We're in your office here today, by the way. We're in the Blue City in Rotterdam, a really great place.
yeah, welcome to Blue City. It's the city of circularity, I would say. I am a combination of two things, I would say. I'm both a product developer, but also a regenerative foods communicator, let's say. Because I find that talking about foods, we have to be able to express in the right way to the external world, like what we're dealing with in food space and what needs to change as well. So I mainly do product development, focusing on how to bring more biodiversity into the food system. And one of the other parts that is interesting for me, of course, is circularity, which is how do we bring different waste streams back into the food system rather than going outside the food system. So it can be vegetables, can be bread, can be anything, because these tend to go out of the food system, and yet their value can be, as Madhura said, can be regained again by creating different ways of adding value to these streams.
So we basically have two sides of the story, like figuring out how to do it and also the regulation, which is obviously also extremely important and hindering or promoting, depending on how you look at it, I guess.
Yeah. So, Sean, you're also a founder. That's why we're here. Founder of Cabana Foodworks, right?
Yes.
So if you could tell us, because we also did our research, so we learned about it. But for those who are watching or listening, also, what is that? What is Cabana Foodworks?
Cabana. I like to keep it small. I call Cabana a food studio because for me it's the space for ideation. So Cabana, I started Cabana, used to be called a green banana food actually. Then I changed it to Gabbana because green banana was like, people would always be wondering what is green banana. I was like, okay, let's call it Gabbana. I think Gabbana is about creating different food concepts, following a very strict or even narrow principle, which is biodiversity, quality of the product, so nutrition side, and then flavor. And then through this, we are able to do to launch different brands or share the food concepts with other external parties. So one of our old companies that's Holy Greens, that's about infusing vegetables into a pasta concept. So veggie pasta in principle. And that started with the idea of bringing the ugly veggies and the surplus veggies and finding value out of these. And we were able to create a pasta out of that. Yeah.
So we're talking about food and food systems. What are you guys' favorite food?
That is a very difficult question because the answer to it changes on a daily basis.
What is your current favorite food?
Well, looking at the weather right now, I really feel like eating an ice cream. So it's very random. but
Understandable.
Yeah.
How about you, Sean? Pasta?
I do love a pasta. No, but I'm actually more into what you'd call fusion food. I'm never really into one thing at a time. So for me, it depends on flavor or what's happening. Recently, with the rise of more South Korean cuisine getting more popular, I find myself into that space, from noodles to a nice South Korean fried chicken. So I can do super healthy. I can do just enjoy food, because to me food is an experience, so I have to enjoy my food.
What's your favorite food right now?
Oh, good question. I don't know. I bought cherries the other day, and they were actually quite nice.
I think it's the season. I think.
Is it cherry season?
It is cherry season, yeah. Right now I think we have a whole pallet in the freezer there's a beer brewer in the building, Fat and Lazy, and they're making a really nice cherry beer. So now we just have a whole pallet in there. They already have some, I think, already, but now they're going to start a new production run. Yeah.
But honestly, maybe because I would be, for example, more willing to buy fruits if I knew they were in season right now. Now,
Yes, exactly.
Walk into the store, see the sign seasonal fruit. I will be like, okay, I'm getting this.
Yeah, and also because I guess most of the fruit here is done in greenhouses, right? This is a thing that I feel like all tomatoes here are grown in greenhouses, and they have no flavor.
Yeah.
Do you agree?
So
Where can I get tomatoes from the ground?
well, they need to be imported then from Spain. So then that's a decision for you to make if you want to eat less flavorful tomatoes grown here in greenhouses, or do you prefer flavorful ones flown in from Spain? So,
and then also next to that is we now have a couple more regenerative farmers who are offering veggie boxes or food boxes. So I think that you're going to see it coming more and more often. And then you can get Dutch grown from the soil tomatoes. I've seen them. We have a couple of... we run a program here in Blue Sea. There's a program called the New Anessa. And it's trying to connect Horeca actors with locally grown stuff. So from region farmers in the neighborhood, different CSAs. And you see that happening a bit more in the Horeca space. People looking for region, soil-grown botanicals, fruits, veggies. But eating seasonally, that's one of the other things that is coming up. We have to eat seasonal, otherwise, what are we talking about?
We've done it for centuries, right?
Exactly. So we need to go back to that. And you can do it if you just are aware of it and the recipes change. So if it's the season for, I don't know, peas, we eat peas. If it's not, there's going to be something else. And the recipes can change based on what we have available without losing good food or tasty food. You can create good food with almost anything. Yeah.
but even then, even if the tomatoes are not grown in greenhouses, they're grown. So growing them in the Netherlands is going to have an impact on how they taste. So I feel like it's also a bit of expectation management about not always wanting the best of everything. Because potatoes here, for example, are so delicious. You have great potatoes here because it's conducive to the climate here, the soil here, but something else may not grow as well as potatoes do. So Yeah, we need to learn to manage our expectations a bit and make do with what we have available locally and seasonally.
Is that what you think? Like that we've kind of gotten used to having the best of the best,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
that's
definitely.
caused a lot of issues.
Yes, so I come from India, and I remember that one of the first things that I did when I got here was I went to the supermarket to do my groceries. And I took pictures of produce here, like the cucumbers, the fruit, the apples, everything, because it looked so perfect, so beautiful. Like I literally took pictures and sent them to my mom back at home. Like, these don't look real, they're so perfect. Because I have grown up eating things that you need to go through. You need to remove some damaged leaves and you need to cut out some parts because food was never perfect. It was always of different sizes and colors, and yeah, that's what people back in India can afford to buy. We cannot have everything that looks so great. So indeed, people here, I think, are very used to getting perfect produce, getting avocados and mangoes and nuts and things like that from all over the world. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I think that process actually creates way too much waste. I was shocked to see you have a standardized size of bell peppers, but that's not how it happens on the farm. So you have big ones, small ones, different sizes. So that's what you get, and you just
Exactly.
yeah. But we have exact same thing. You have the same with bananas. Like you could never find a banana a bunch, so it has different clusters on it. They will never look the same. But what we've made is we're trying to standardize nature on the farm side, and we're trying to standardize food on the shelf side. And what you end up with is just too much food that is pulled out of the food chain. And where does that go? That's the question. Like it ends up in, I don't know, organic bins and bio composting spaces. Because in nature, it doesn't happen like that, that you have this beautiful array of the same looking tomato. And no, it cannot happen like that.
I remember being in the market on the market in Portugal, and they had the bananas, and they were like tiny, and they were grown in Madeira, like the Portuguese island, and they were called Madeira bananas because they were not allowed to be called bananas, because actual normal bananas, because they were too small, they did not fit the size. Madhura, do you think that that laws are working against using these other types of imperfect vegetables, or that it's more of like a consumer side, or do those two kind of reinforce each other?
Well, laws is very broad. I can say something about regulation in the European Union.
Yeah.
And the size issue that we're talking about, the cosmetic part of it, is actually not coming from law. It's coming from quality specifications that retailers have. And these quality specifications, they seep into what you call private standards, which is a combination of legislation and consumer demand and quality requirements that sort of become de facto mandatory in the market. So there is quality and there is safety. And if you speak of safety, then yes, legislation does put in some barriers to what can be valorized and what cannot be. But in the case of the European Union, we need to understand that the general food law that we have here is a reaction to the mad cow disease crisis that happened in the late 90s. So that is something that happened because of contamination of animal feed. It's a prion disease. So cows ended up eating parts and remains from other animals, and they got prion disease, which passed on to humans. And it's a very dangerous neurodegenerative disease, and it was truly a public health and social crisis in the late 90s. So the food law that we have right now is built from a place of wanting to protect consumers to make sure that a disease, an epidemic like the BSE does not happen again. I feel like we're coming out of it a little bit now. For example, it's now allowed to use some animal byproducts in fish feed because they've been doing tests for a lot of years now to see which animals can get sick with prion disease and which cannot. So we're coming out of it a little bit now, but the general food law is really built on this precautionary principle of making sure that something like this doesn't happen again.
It kind of feels like it reinforces each other, right? You make like standards that all the food needs to be safe and therefore like in a uniform way, and then consumers get used to that, and then they only want that. So then the suppliers also don't want to like, right? Is that how you feel it kind of has been for the past decades in terms of?
I think so. I mean, you can see that on the shelves themselves, or what people are looking for, because the supermarket will only sell something that people will buy. If nobody's buying it, they will never do it because it's about the money in the end. So at the end of the day, indeed, it's us as consumers that have to change our priorities. I was happy, I think from last year or the year before, we started getting these the tiny apples in Albert Heijn, getting a big bag. Like you have
the L-stars, the small, or
I don't know, L-star or something else, but these tiny apples, which I actually really liked because they're always nice and crisp and small. But that was not your standard, and that was like their way of saying, oh yeah, we also can sell non-standardized products. But I was like, it works because people just buy it, and it's interesting. So I think one of the issues I notice is, us as consumers, we think we don't have the power to change things, and we're just dependent on the institution of the supermarket, like to tell us what to eat. But at the end of the day, actually, we can make that change, because if we go to the supermarket and just pick whatever we want, or just say, I don't mind eating this, I don't mind having a ripe banana with the brown spots. Because it's always weird, like there's never a ripe banana on the shelves. Like, where do they go? And yet, to eat a ripe banana with the spots is the best banana because it's perfectly sweet. But in the Netherlands, we tend to eat semi-green, or just, when I try, I'm like, no, what are you eating? It's too starchy. The banana has to be super brown. Then you get a good taste. So I think the issue is regular people realizing they have more power than they do, and with that power, then you can actually change at a system level stuff. But we leave it on to the institution and corporate level to tell us what to do, and I find it very strange.
Do you agree with that, Madhura?
To an extent, yes. Consumers are quite a powerful group, but also, it's strange to me that sustainable products are often more expensive than non-sustainable ones. So at the end of the day, so I was a PhD student who was working on sustainability issues 40 plus hours a week. But when I go to the supermarket, I'm sometimes forced to buy things that are not the most sustainable because I don't earn enough to always buy organic or buy stuff with labels on it. I did my best to buy whatever I could, but I couldn't always buy the most sustainable product. So I feel like we should not leave it only to the consumer to make the sustainable choice, because companies that make these more ethical, more sustainable products, they should not have to compete with mass-produced products that can be manufactured for so cheap. Yeah. So it has to do a little bit, so the institutions also have to step in a bit, and there we can do more as citizens than as consumers, because we need to hold our representatives accountable for their actions. We need to vote for people who have ideas on how to make the food system or other production systems more sustainable, more durable. As individuals, if a lot of people invest in companies, so we can make the choice to invest in up and coming companies that are doing some great innovation in this space instead of investing in multinationals and so on. So yeah, we can do a lot as people, whether it's as consumers, as citizens, as community members. Yeah, there's a lot that we can do.
But do you think that in the past few years there's been already some kind of improvement of this sustainable products being more accessible for the public?
In the Netherlands, yes, I think so, because Sean knows more about this, of course. But I think there is, compared to a lot of other countries, quite some support in the Netherlands for entrepreneurs who have good ideas, who want to start new things. So I feel like you have quite a few options on the shelves in the Netherlands that are made sustainably, that are made more ethically. What do you think?
Yeah, I think on a larger scale, you could see what's happening with Lidl, for instance. They're having one of the best runs on organic products. The pricing is quite pretty good. And then you see now Jumbo is jumping in as well. I saw their campaign the other day about, our organic line is actually quite affordable. So doing that, I think you're going to have like a ripple effect. So I assume Albert Heijn has to do the same, because there's no reason for organic to always be overpriced over everything else. Like, it doesn't make sense. Because on the production side, there's a difference, but not that big of a difference between organic and non-organic.
So what is the difference then?
Yes.
Why is it more expensive?
It's just a commercial
Is it
aspect.
yeah.
It's just product positioning. Because positioning-wise, we valued organic to be better. So in the psychology, it is better.
Yeah.
And in the psychology of consumers, we are willing to pay a premium, because that's what we're always told. Pay a premium that goes to help the company, to help the farmer. But that premium rarely goes to the maker, actually. It just remains at the company level. So that kind of reinforces this idea that organic has to be expensive. But it doesn't have to be. Because you see the groente box, the veggie boxes we're talking about from region farmers, they're no more expensive than HelloFresh or any other. It's
true.
Yeah.
It's just not very accessible.
Exactly. So accessibility is the other part, because the supermarket has the accessibility power, so they can determine whatever they want to do. And you to go to the farmer to get your box. We have another company in Rotterdam called Rechtstreeks, and they have these pickup locations. And I noticed they're growing more and more. So I think also there's an interesting shift in people trying to find other ways to access good food, healthy food. So if I don't have to go to the supermarket, then I can work with Rechtstreeks, get my order. It's at a pickup location. Once a week or twice a week, I go there, I get my stuff. I'm good. So earlier in the chat we had talking about these alternative market channels that we have to build. So if we can't change mainstream retail, maybe we can build a whole new system, like Madhura was saying, where people are more involved, but also the institutions in it are aware of what they're doing and they're held responsible to that. Because you can't really I get mad with... I keep saying Albert Heijn because it's the most dominant, but they have this brand Terra.
Oh yeah.
And you get it and look at the ingredients, and it's no different than the other thing. But who do you talk to? Because I cannot complain to Albert Heijn. Like you don't have anybody to talk to about it. But if it was a small company, if it's Gabbana, you're reachable. People can reach you. They can email. They can call you direct. I find that. Indeed, supporting smaller brands that are really trying to make a difference can have a big effect and also create more ripple effects as well.
Well, I'm wondering because I feel like there's always this idea that good ingredients are expensive. Like I know, like if I make my own meat, and if I use good honey, it's just better honey than if I go to the store and it says a mix of EU and non-EU honey, and you kind of like are like, what is in it? How can they make it so cheap? I hear you saying that like organic, for example, does not need to be much more expensive than non-organic.
Yeah.
But good food just generally more expensive than
For some, I don't know why, but
Yeah, it's not that good food is more expensive. The issue is that bad food is.
1 second.
ik heb daar alarm gehoord. Oh ja? Ja, I put on the code.
Are we still rolling? A little break, but we can continue. I wanted to hear your story.
Yes, I was saying that it's not that good food is expensive. Bad food is cheap. That's the problem. Because, well, bad is very.
Worse.
Yeah, I mean, food that is.
Optimized for cost.
Processed a lot, optimized for cost, can be produced really cheaply. And it's not something that's happened overnight. There have been companies that have worked on this for years and years to make their processes and their procurement so cost effective that they can now produce this product for a really low price. But that's not the case for food that's produced with care, with paying workers fair wages. So that is how much food should normally cost. And food that is very cheap, we really need to look into why is it so cheap? Like, it's not normal for something to cost so little, you know? So it shouldn't be that such cheap food is on the market. But we also then need to look at, it doesn't mean that only wealthy people should be able to afford good food. People who are, who are facing problems when it comes to employment or finances and so on, should be supported in a way that they can also be able to eat good food. That's not something they should have to compromise on.
Yeah. Yeah, like, do you see a future in which like we move away from cost optimized cheap food and go towards like the mainstream is just good food? And do you see like a role in like that policy could play in achieving that?
A role, yes. So saying that we don't want the system to be as it is right now is really saying that is really having to change the way we work. It's going against capitalism in a way, you know. So we would need a real systems overhaul kind of a thing. So it is possible, but whether or not it happens is something we need to see.
It still remains to be seen. Well, before the recording, we were talking about that course that I took on food history. It was quite interesting. They were talking at one point about the history in the Americas versus here in Europe, where in Europe, I guess like natural food has always been kind of a thing. Like you had farmers and stuff like that, but like because America was such an industrializing country, there was a story about how they pasteurize all their milk there, they pasteurize the eggs.
Huh?
Yeah. So like my mom, who's from the US, puts the eggs in the fridge because they chemically treat them so that you can't store them outside of the fridge anymore.
To be fair,
Yeah.
back at home we also store eggs in the fridge.
Really?
But I don't know how this came to be. My mom, she always puts eggs in the fridge, so I also do it at home right now. I also do
Really?
put eggs in the fridge just because I got used to it.
Well, they were talking about how all these companies, like the big corporations, also influence policy to favor that, to make standards.
Yeah.
For example, it was cheese. Like all milk in cheese there has to be pasteurized. Well, you know, the cheese, all the funky cheese that you have, like the camemberts and stuff like that, has like molds and whatever not in it, and that's not possible in the US because of food laws that were like lobbied for.
Yeah.
And therefore also change the entire system. So now you have like American cheese, which
Yeah.
who knows what's in there,
Yeah, I think in the US, I mean that's also in Europe as well. You have lobbies, but I think in the US it's really next level kind of lobbying. Corporate power is really strong there, and a lot of it is it's a reaction to war, a reaction to scarcity, a reaction to workers working such long hours that when they come back home, they do not have the time to cook a whole meal. Like I mentioned previously, it's also got to do with women entering the workforce and not staying at home anymore to cook 3 meals a day. So the food system that we have now is a reaction to all of these changes that have happened in the last decades. And as researchers or people working on sustainability issues in the food system, we tend to be very critical and very cynical about the current state of things. But if you take a step back and if you zoom out a little bit and go to 100 years back, we really had scarcity of food. Like hunger was a huge problem. It still is a problem. We've not solved world hunger. But if you look at the trend, we are less hungry now than we have been in the last 100 years. And there was the Green Revolution in the 50s, where really it was about we have to feed people, we have to get more out of the land. We need to think about now. We were not in a position to think about, okay, what's going to happen if we use so much fertilizer? What's going to happen if we go very industrial in our agriculture? Because no, the concern was of the present, of feeding the world. So from there, we've come a long way, really. We get a lot more out of the land than we used to, and we're much better placed in a way. So now we have the luxury of not only thinking of the present, but also thinking about the future, that, you know, we want the next generations to also continue eating good food, to have enough food. So this is really a luxurious position to be in, that we can spare thoughts for the future. And we absolutely should. We do not have an excuse anymore to say that, oh, we need to really intensify our processes to keep producing more, even if it comes at the cost of soils becoming infertile. So,
yeah, exactly. So we kind of like did a sprint, and now we have some thinking room. Is that kind of where we're at? Is that also what the literature is looking at currently?
Yes, some aspects of it, indeed. And it's not that we can stop thinking about producing enough, because the population of the world isn't going to go down. It's only going to go up. And the land that we have to produce food is not going to expand a lot. So we still have to think about efficiency, because when there is less food, the people who feel it, the people who suffer, are people who are not wealthy, people who are from developing parts of the world. They are the ones who will face the consequences if we say that, okay, we don't want intensive agriculture, we want to go all organic. Then, yeah, you cannot feed everyone. But at the same time, we need to be more conscious of the drawbacks of these systems, and we need to figure out how to reduce the negative impacts of industrial agriculture.
Sean, since you design foods to be good, and hearing what Madhura says about having to change the way we produce food and go about food, but also have to keep that efficiency so that people don't starve to death. Like, what challenges do you see there? Can we scale good food like products to an efficiency that can still feed the world?
Yeah, actually see more of an opportunity rather than a challenge, actually.
Okay. Great answer.
Because the opportunity is in what we're talking about, biodiversity. Because what we've done, what Madhura was mentioning, post-Second World War, we had to grow one variety of wheat that grows faster, that was designed to grow as quick as possible. So we kind of forgot all these other grains that were still there. So what we have to do now is we can have still enough wheat if we look at it from a variety perspective rather than just a single grain that is grown. So if Ukrainian grain is not coming in, but we still have all these other different types of grains that are grown here or from other places. So then food innovation has to adapt. And production lines have to be designed to be adaptable. Because when you design a production line that is handling a specific wheat with specific characteristics, then you bring in a different type, then the machine is like, I don't know what this is. I don't know what to do with it. Then there things start to go wrong. But what we're doing is we're trying to show that food design and product development can actually work in favor of biodiversity, of having more variety ingredients in the food system without having to change too much on the consumer side. So if we get in quinoa, people had to figure out how to eat quinoa, and then we get into the quinoa salad space. But many people still don't know what to do with quinoa, for instance. But if you turn it into a pasta or into a bread or into a breakfast cereal, then people know what to do with that. So what we're trying to do is, can I make a pasta with 4 different grains in it? Because each single grain maybe is weaker because it's not optimized as the standardized grain, because that's optimized to make pasta, to make bread. But if I have 4 different grains, each has its own weakness and strength. And by combining these different grains, I reach the optimal properties that I need to make a good pasta. So the end consumer is still enjoying a really good pasta. The only difference is this has 4 grains and this has 1 grain. And that, I think, is what we need to push a bit more going forward in terms of we can have healthy food, we can have local foods, but we have to think about it from what you're really eating, not what you're told you need to eat. So if I'm eating Grande Italia pasta, which is just cheap, basic pasta, or I eat pasta from a farmer 2 kilometers down the road, I think I'd rather eat the farmer's pasta because that's interesting.
Well, I think I have 2 questions.
Okay.
Yeah,
Cool.
because these all relate to like the projects I've seen come by over the years, led by students related to food.
Yeah.
And I'm curious. The Holy Greens, with the pasta infused with vegetables, seems like a new concept. I don't know if it necessarily is but like acceptance, because we have like this system where the bananas are exactly this long, and we expect certain foods to be certain foods. Because I feel like you can come up with a pasta that uses 4 grains that no one's heard of, versus like normal traditional wheat pasta, and it might have a different consistency or different taste or different texture or whatever. Maybe, I'm not quite sure. But like, what role does that play? Like consumer acceptance? Because like, I remember, I think one of the projects that we tried to do is that we wanted to make some kind of like cornflakes from leftover breadcrumbs.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it worked.
Yeah.
But the texture was awful. Like, I wouldn't buy that. Which, like, how do you look at that?
I mean, there's 2 sides to consumer acceptance. One is you bring them to the level of the product how it's normally expected, or you gradually drive them to a new experience. So those are 2 ways you could do it. But I think here is the role now of the innovators, so product development process, because the veggie pasta we made, I had one key role. That was the pasta has to have the same eating experience as as regular pasta, because indeed the barrier to entry is much less if I'm eating a beetroot pasta and it feels like pasta, rather than if it feels like something else. Then there you have an issue. And you see that in plant-based meat alternatives, because I think the mistake was we were built on this expectation, we're making a meat-like thing. Yeah. But if we were told that it's just an interesting, tasty thing without any expectations, because I eat tofu and I have no expectation of tofu. It's there, and depending on how you prepare it. But because the plant-based meat is like, oh yeah, it has the same bite and chewing, like, but it's not.
Right, you're already addressing the thing that you're trying to solve. Interesting.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So creating this expectation would be like, we made these products, it's made of this and this is how you eat it. Zero expectation, and you let people decide. Yeah.
Do you want to add on to that?
Well, the thing with food is that it is so connected to culture, right? It's very personal. It's not like other products that we use in our daily lives. So it also depends on the region and the place where you're trying to produce and sell this product. So perhaps in the Netherlands, it is a bit easier to get people to say that, okay, I can try this pasta made from vegetables or different grains. But I wonder how that would play out in Italy, for example, where they're passionate about their pasta. You know, also you see that with meat. So with lab-grown meat, for example, Italy has it's got a tradition with its meat products and so on. So consumers, and that's reflected also back in the policy processes, they're very skeptical about allowing these kind of products on the market, and that's to do with food culture. So there is no one size fits all kind of an answer. Yeah. So if you're innovating in the Netherlands, then yes, perhaps this strategy works well. If you're doing it in another part of the world, you have to adapt to what people like eating and what they consider good and sustainable and, you know.
Yeah, I agree with that completely, because I, for example, grew up in Eastern Europe and we have a very big like meat eating culture. So I can imagine, apart from the barrier of like what we already mentioned, that it would be more expensive probably for people to buy the meat alternatives, it just probably would not be accepted in general. But I wonder if, because we're talking about innovators bringing new products, and if it has for example, pasta, right? If it has the same taste and the same experience, maybe then the big stores, like we talk in Albert Heijn, should kind of promote it more, maybe work in collaboration with those innovators to kind of bring it more to the people.
Maybe. I mean, when we did the veggie pasta, then we went into conversation with Unilever. Unilever was interested in the concept and trying to see if they can take it on. That didn't work, but then later on they launched their own veggie pasta under the Knorr brand. So they have a role to play, but sometimes we always have to remember, I think, that these commercial institutions, for them, capital money is the king, so it's the driver. They will make changes and introduce new concepts once there's a proven concept
that will bring money.
So I think that's the role of innovators, to kind of launch new vehicles in the food space, and then the big guys will pick it up. We saw that with plant-based milk. It was just always small brands just doing their thing. And then before you know it, the big guys come, oh, okay, we want this. Whether that's good or not good, that's like a whole other conversation we can have. But I think what Madhura also said is food innovation, indeed, food has to be contextualized. Italy is actually one of the biggest gluten-free pasta markets, because they have more issues with gluten, because they have eaten the hybrid or GMO wheat for so long. So they're actually struggling worse than most other people. So they have to change based on health requirements, dietary requirements, to adapt to different foods. So depending on the market you are, you have to develop the product for that market. You cannot develop a product for the sake of the product or the science of creating something new, because then nobody's going to eat it.
Right.
You see that in even the big companies. The McDonald's you find in India, the flavor is going to be a bit different than you have in most other countries. because they have to match the markets and the people they're in. So I think that's the same thing we have to do in food. If we're developing a product, be it with circular ingredients or biodiversity-rich ingredients, it always has to be tailored to your local market, the culture of the space, the flavor profile. So we cannot do a spicy sauce here, for instance. No, you can't, because then nobody's going to eat it that well. But if I was in, I don't know, in Asia, in South Korea, which you mentioned, it has to be spicy. The kimchi we get here is lukewarm. Proper kimchi is burning hot. So yeah, that's kind of how I look at product development. But I think the underlying principle remains the same. You can find so many other alternative ingredients to create a product with the same characteristics. And that way is the only way we can reduce the monocrop industry agriculture and open up space for biodiversity-rich food systems. Yeah. I think so.
And Madhura, I had a different question for you, maybe not so much related to the food topic, but more towards the science communication topic. Like I think this podcast was grown from an idea of that we would like to connect academia and business. Like how do you like valorize research and make it applicable for people like Sean, you know, to like use and transform?
Well, I don't think of science communication necessarily as valorization, because I do communicate about my own research, but I also like talking about what's happening in the scientific circles when it comes to food and sustainability and innovation and so on. And partly it started from for a bit of a selfish reason, because I write a lot of scientific articles and they're very dry. they're very they're very lengthy, and the kind of terminology used there is it's heavy, and I missed creative writing. I always enjoyed writing more creatively. So I thought, okay, like this is a space that I'm going to use to talk about the same topics. So I don't have to go hunting for topics, because I work with these topics a lot. So I'm going to write about them, but in a way that's lighter, that's more fun, that's easier to access for people who may not be working in research, but they're still interested in food. Mm-hmm. So that's how it started. Like I mentioned, it started with a blog where I would just write and not expect anyone to read. It was just my little hobby. But then I started getting invitations from researchers and from colleagues saying that, hey, I have this paper and I want to write a summary of it, or I want to write an article that makes it easy to understand what I've published in this scientific journal. So that's how it started. It came from a space of having a bit of fun with food, with sustainability, with those kind of topics.
But do you also need to like work then on taking like a theoretical concept and like turning it more into like a practical idea? Is that something you do as well?
It's something that I try to do. Mm-hmm. I also try to, like you don't have to use jargon and you don't have to use all these fancy words to convey an idea. It can also be done in a much simpler way. So I avoid trying to translate frameworks into a casual article. I try to focus on what the outcomes are, what it means for the future. And there's always a link to the original research. So people who want to know more can find it, and they can write to the authors or they can write to me, and we can always discuss it.
Do you ever read any academic articles, Sean?
Or that's how I survive.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, because trying to figure out, because my background is not really food science, but I have to deal with the physiochemical characteristics of stuff. So I have to understand proteins and starches and heat and all these things. So when I have a problem, then I have to go read a whole bunch of things, summarize, then I go apply what I've learned. So during the couple of years, I find that you get more and more into all these different spaces. Now I find actually I understand a lot of food chemistry and I'm like, okay, I've been doing this now. Because for me, I think in a way, trying to create all these unconventional products with unconventional ingredients, I had to understand the science of things. And that keeps me, actually I enjoy it because it keeps me fresh and awake, and I feel like I understand what's actually happening in my product and what's going on. And that's why I'm actually really happy with most of the stuff we make ends up being really good because we understood the fundamentals of what makes pasta. Because if you understand that, then you can find how to plug in all the gaps you have with all the different ingredients. Because I know I'm looking for, I don't know, a flour with high amylopectin, and this one is high in amylose, but then all this I need that. I need an alkaline base, or what is that going to do with this color? The other day I was doing a blueberry pasta, but then there was
Okay.
exactly. But then because it had to be more of a, because it's supposed to be a dessert pasta, so it needs to be a bit more soft.
It's dessert pasta.
I love pasta for dessert.
I've never had pasta for dessert.
Sugar over
You're
it.
going to upset your Italian audience.
No,
No, but
in Eastern Europe they do a strawberry pasta.
Yeah.
They're like, yeah.
It's true.
Strawberry
Yeah.
pasta. Yep.
So I'm actually trying to create a concept in that space, but then I had to put a sodium bicarbonate, a baking soda, but that changes the pH. So then that changes the color of the thing. So so I have to change now the chemistry inside. Then I went reading and I ended up in lye water space, and I was like, okay, I don't know what I'm doing, but that's science is so important for food, but not in the industrial way we are thinking about it, like really in practical spaces. Because if you understand the fundamentals, all of a sudden everything becomes usable. Because if I meet a flour, I meet a grain, a seed, I'm already happy with it because I'm like, oh, that can do that, that can do that. Because now I know what they're supposed to do.
Wonderful. I think we don't have much time, unfortunately, left. So I think, should talk about takeaways.
Yeah, because that is exactly what I was going to ask. You read my mind. Because I think food is amazing and everybody loves food and we all need it to survive. Like in both of your professional opinions, like if someone's looking to get involved in the sustainable food space, like how would they get involved and what should they focus on according to you?
What can we do?
Madhura?
do you mean as students or?
Yeah, like me. I want to get.
we want to do something good for.
Yeah, like
future.
what do you feel are the biggest challenges currently that are being worked on and need the most urgent solving, and how can people get involved?
Well, the big challenges you have, there's circularity, there's the protein transition, there's regenerative agriculture, and all of these things, they're not monolith. You need expertise from so many different disciplines, you need a lot of different kinds of skills. So it's not that you have to be an innovator or a chemist or something of the sort. You can have any sort of background and you can work on food. As a student, I asked because I think being a student is really, it's like a sandbox. You can take courses that are interesting. You can approach your teachers and professors to ask them if they work on this topic and do a project with them. You can do internships if you want to test the space and see if it's something that you like. You can do something like you're doing. trying to connect different kinds of stakeholders and trying to get the conversation going, which itself is a catalyst for bigger change, I think. So there's so much that you can do yourself, but you can also speak with people around you, motivate them, get inspired by them, and that snowballs into bigger things.
Yeah, you don't need to go reinventing bread in its entirety or whatever.
If that's your thing, you can do that, of course. But you can also promote this bread. You can buy this bread. You can support businesses that are trying to make this bread. There's so much that
So
you can do.
basically, you can start small and already make a difference.
Yes.
Okay. Sean, what about you?
For me, I think primarily has to do everything she said, but then think about it from your own personal strength. Because everything we do, it's going to cost you way much more time and energy than you think. Even if it's a job, like a regular job, we need to get a job to get money, but at the same time, you have to do a job you enjoy going to. So nowadays, there's this idea of passion, like do your passion thing is no longer a thing, but I think it's a thing. If you're going to do food products, it has to be something you enjoy. You have to enjoy playing with food, cooking, learning, because the learning curve is that step you have to do. If you're into art and design and films, and there's a role to play because we need communication, we need media, we need storytelling. So I think it starts from the person, what you want to do, what you're motivated by mainly, and then see how it applies, because there's so many facets in food and agriculture that everybody is needed. Right now, one of the parts of Gabbana is we're trying to develop smart microfactories. So the idea is to localize food processing, so to have a distributed network of processing hubs. So instead of everything being centralized, we can have localized processing capacity. But that means I have to learn about AI, robotics, automation, smart. I have no idea about these topics, but it's something I have to do. So you can be an aerospace engineer, because one of my co-founders is an aerospace engineer in Delft, and still play a role in food. You can be, I don't know, a coder, and you're still needed in the food space to build an AI platform. So I think it's really based on the resource you have as yourself and the thing you enjoy to do. You're going to find your space in food and circular spaces as well.
And obviously you're here in this building with a lot of like circular companies and startups, and you're at the FU. Are there like networks or places you can go to get like inspiration? Let's say that someone or myself, I don't know, or you, Lisa, like it would be like I would like to just listen to people like you two talk and get ideas and get inspired. What would you suggest people start?
You can look at what's happening in your own city, especially if you live in cities like Rotterdam, Amsterdam, Utrecht, and so on. There's a lot happening in those areas. And cities are great places for experimentation and for networking, because you have so many resources concentrated in these places. And the municipalities, at least in the Netherlands, are also trying to help and support these kind of initiatives. So your local urban environment is a good space to check. If you work at a university or these kind of innovation spaces, there's also just talk to people. Social media is also great for that. Find them on LinkedIn, start a conversation, and who knows, it can turn into something.
That's
very
how we
exciting.
got these two people here. Start a
No, you'll be
conversation.
surprised how open people are. Like, you can just reach out to anybody on LinkedIn, and if you have a genuine question, people will get back to you, or just to network. Like, I want to learn what you're doing, and like, yeah, sure, just whenever you have time, just come by. Like Blue City has every last Thursday of the month, there's always like an open talk kind of thing where people can just come in and listen to different companies talk about what they're doing, and small network thing, nothing fancy. Internships are great. Like, do as much as you can, because if you're combining your theory and the practical side of things, it's the only quickest way to learn. Absolutely. Like, you have to get your hands into stuff, and then before you know it, you're doing way too much. Yeah, exactly. Like,
It's a good one to round it off on.
Yeah.
I think I have so many more questions though, but
We can talk after the recording.
you wanna send us off?
Yes, of course. Thank you so much for joining us. It was a pleasure to have you. And it was Pop Mo Podcast, your host Lisa.
And Stefan.
Thank you so much for tuning in. Don't forget to check out our social media and check out what we do here. And till next time.
Until next time. Oh, that went fast.